Welcome to Yad English Center, where learning English becomes an exciting adventure. Today, we embark on a thrilling journey through history, exploring the life of one of its most controversial figures, Adolf Hitler. Love him or hate him, his story is filled with dreams, failures, ambition, and power, from a small boy with big dreams to a man who changed the world forever. This is the story of Adolf Hitler, like you've never heard before. Are you ready? Grab your headphones, sit back, and let's dive into this incredible tale that will not only improve your English, but keep you hooked till the very end.
A humble beginning. On April 20th, 1889, in the quiet town of Braunau am in Austria, a baby boy was born to Alois and Clara Hitler. They named him Adolf. No one could have predicted that this small, fragile child would one day become one of history's most infamous figures. At that moment, he was just another baby in a world full of dreams and possibilities. His future was unwritten, his destiny unknown. As a child, Adolf was not particularly special. He loved to play outside, explore his surroundings, and, most of all, draw. He could sit for hours, sketching buildings, landscapes, and faces, lost in a world of his own. His mother, Clara, adored him and encouraged his artistic talent. She saw something special in her son, something others often overlooked. But his father, Alois, had other plans. A strict and disciplined man, Alois worked as a government official and expected his son to follow in his footsteps. "I want to be an artist," young Adolf would often say, his eyes shining with excitement. He dreamed of painting grand masterpieces, of having his work displayed in famous galleries. But Alois dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "Art is not a real profession," he would bark, his voice filled with authority. "You need a stable job, not silly dreams." The tension in their home grew. Clara, a gentle and loving mother, tried to shield her son from his father's harsh words, but there was little she could do. The arguments became frequent, and the household often felt heavy with unspoken pain. Young Adolf, feeling misunderstood, withdrew into his world of sketches and imagination. He found comfort in his drawings, in the quiet escape they provided from the harsh realities of life. Then, everything changed. When Adolf was just 13 years old, his father suddenly passed away. Many assumed that he would feel a sense of relief, free from his father's control. But instead, he felt lost and adrift. Without his father's strict discipline, he started to lose focus. School no longer interested him, and he began skipping classes. His teachers, who had once praised his intelligence, now shook their heads in disappointment. "Adolf is bright, but he lacks discipline," they would say. His grades dropped, but he didn't seem to care. His heart was elsewhere. He dreamed of attending the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and becoming a renowned painter. But life was not so kind. When he applied to the academy, his dreams were shattered. He failed the entrance exam not once, but twice. The rejection was a crushing blow. How could they not see his talent? How could they deny him his dream? He wandered through the streets of Vienna, lost in despair. With nowhere else to turn, Adolf found himself living in poverty. He stayed in cheap hostels, struggling to survive. He sold postcards and small paintings to earn a meager income, but it was never enough. The harsh reality of life weighed heavily on him. He saw the world around him through a different lens, one filled with bitterness and resentment. And so, with dreams in his heart and uncertainty ahead, young Adolf stood at the crossroads of his life, unaware of the dark path he would one day take. He had once dreamed of bringing beauty to the world through art, but fate had chosen a different path for him, one that would lead to unimaginable destruction. A dream shattered. After finishing school, Adolf packed his bags and moved to Vienna, the grand capital of Austria. His heart was filled with excitement and hope. This is the city of art. I will become a famous painter here, he thought, imagining himself walking through the grand halls of Vienna's prestigious art galleries. His masterpieces admired by all. Vienna was a city of culture, elegance, and opportunity. Everywhere he looked, there were towering cathedrals, grand opera houses, and breathtaking works of art. He could almost hear the whispers of history in the streets. Confident in his talent, he applied to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts, dreaming of the day he would walk through its doors as a student. But fate had other plans. When the results came, his heart pounded as he unfolded the letter. Then, his world shattered. He was rejected. His hands trembled as he read the words again, hoping he had misunderstood. But the truth was undeniable. "No, this can't be," he murmured. "They don't see my talent." Determined, he refused to give up. He spent another year practicing, improving his skills, believing that next time they would see his potential. When the academy opened its doors for applications again, he submitted his work with renewed hope. But when the results were announced, the rejection came again. Rejected again. This time, the pain was unbearable. Humiliated and devastated, he felt the walls of his dreams crumble around him. He had always believed that talent and passion were enough to succeed. But now, he faced the harsh reality. His dream was slipping through his fingers. With no school, no degree, and no backup plan, life became unbearable. He wandered through the streets of Vienna, watching others pursue their dreams while he was left behind. Money ran out quickly. The little savings he had disappeared, and soon he found himself living in tiny, dirty rooms, barely able to afford food. Some nights, he had no roof over his head and was forced to sleep on park benches or in dark alleyways, shivering in the cold. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. He survived by painting postcards, small, rushed sketches of Vienna's landmarks, which he sold to tourists for a few coins. It was a pitiful existence, far from the grand future he had envisioned. Why is life so unfair? He often wondered as he watched the wealthy citizens of Vienna walk past him, dressed in fine clothes, without a care in the world. Then, another tragedy struck. His beloved mother, Clara, the only person who had ever truly supported him, fell seriously ill. He rushed back home, desperate to help, but there was nothing he could do. He watched helplessly as the illness drained the life from her. When she finally passed away, his last source of warmth and love vanished. He was alone, no father, no mother, no friends, no future. The pain of loss burned deep inside him. At first, he was overcome with grief, but soon, grief turned into something darker: anger, resentment. He began looking for someone to blame. "It's not my fault," he convinced himself. He refused to accept responsibility for his failures. Instead, he started to believe that unseen forces were working against him, keeping him from the success he deserved. This bitterness would soon take root deep within him, growing into something far more dangerous than even he could have imagined. The war that changed everything. In 1914, everything changed. The world was on the brink of chaos as the Great War, later known as World War I, erupted. Countries called upon their young men to fight, and the streets of Europe were filled with patriotic songs, passionate speeches, and banners calling for bravery. For many, war meant destruction and suffering, but for Adolf, it meant something else. "This is my chance," he thought. "A chance to prove myself, a chance to be part of something greater than just me." Adolf had spent years feeling lost, rejected, and insignificant. But now, war offered him a purpose. Without hesitation, he joined the German army, ready to fight for the empire. Clad in a soldier's uniform, with a rifle in his hands and fire in his heart, he marched off to war with thousands of other young men, unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. Life in the trenches was brutal. Mud, blood, and death surrounded him daily. The deafening explosions of artillery shook the earth, and the cries of wounded soldiers echoed through the air. Each day was a battle for survival, and Adolf soon learned the harsh reality of war. Yet, despite the horrors, he embraced it. He was fearless, volunteering for dangerous missions and running across open battlefields to deliver messages between units. Enemy bullets whizzed past him, but he pressed on. His fellow soldiers admired his courage, and his superiors took notice. Twice, he was awarded the Iron Cross, a prestigious military honor, for his bravery under fire. For the first time in his life, he felt valued. He belonged. He was no longer a struggling artist or a homeless man selling postcards. He was a soldier, a warrior, a patriot. But in 1918, the war took a devastating turn. Germany, once confident in victory, was now on the verge of collapse. Morale among the soldiers plummeted. Food and supplies ran low. And then came the final blow. The war ended and Germany surrendered. Adolf was in disbelief. The empire he had fought so hard for had fallen. As news of the surrender spread, he felt something deep inside him break. Rage filled his heart. How could this happen? How could Germany, with its proud history and powerful army, be defeated? Furious, he refused to accept the truth. "We were not beaten on the battlefield," he shouted. "Our leaders have failed us. They have betrayed us." To him, Germany had been stabbed in the back not by the enemy, but by weak politicians and corrupt forces from within. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated the nation, forcing it to accept blame for the war, crippling its economy and stripping it of its power. As he walked through the broken streets of Germany, he saw hunger, desperation, and despair. He saw veterans, once heroes, now reduced to beggars, factories closed, families starved. The Germany he loved was in ruins. And in that moment, Adolf made a silent vow. "This will not be the end," he whispered to himself. "Germany will rise again, and this time it will be stronger than ever." Little did the world know, the war had not ended for Adolf. It had only just begun. The rise of a leader. After the war, Germany was in chaos. Poverty, hunger, and anger filled the streets. Adolf saw an opportunity. He joined a small political group called the German Workers' Party. His speeches were powerful, filled with passion and rage. People listened. He gave them hope and someone to blame. "Germany will rise again," he declared. Soon, he transformed the party into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party. He designed a new symbol, a red flag with a black swastika. "This will be the most powerful symbol in the world," he proclaimed. His words ignited a fire in people's hearts. Thousands gathered to hear him speak, believing in his dream of a powerful Germany. But Adolf's ideas were dangerous. He blamed certain groups for Germany's problems, fueling division and hatred. The path to power. By the early 1920s, Germany was a nation on the edge. The economy had collapsed, inflation was out of control, and people carried wheelbarrows full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Anger and frustration filled the streets, and Adolf Hitler saw his moment to act. In 1923, he decided it was time to seize control. Inspired by past revolutions, He led his followers in an attempt to overthrow the government in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He and his men stormed a political gathering in Munich, declaring a national revolution. "This is the moment," he shouted to the crowd. "Germany must be saved." But the government was not so easily overthrown. Police forces quickly crushed the uprising, and Adolf was arrested. His dream of taking power had failed. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served only 9 months. Yet, those months behind bars would prove to be a turning point. While sitting in his small prison cell, he put pen to paper. He poured his thoughts, beliefs, and ambitions into a book that would change history, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In its pages, he laid out his vision for a new Germany, a powerful empire that would rise from the ashes. He blamed Germany's enemies, both foreign and within, for the country's downfall. He spoke of national pride, expansion, and unity, but beneath his words lay dangerous ideas of division and hatred. When he was released, Adolf emerged more determined than ever. His failure in the Beer Hall Putsch had taught him a valuable lesson: power could not be taken by force alone. If he wanted to rule Germany, he needed to do it legally. And so, he changed his strategy. The Nazi Party, once a group of street fighters and radicals, transformed into a political machine. Adolf traveled across the country, delivering fiery speeches that mesmerized the masses. He promised jobs to the unemployed, pride to the humiliated, and strength to the weak. He told them what they wanted to hear. Slowly, his influence grew. The Nazi Party gained more and more seats in the German parliament. By the early 1930s, the country was desperate for a leader, someone who could pull them out of economic ruin and restore their former glory. And Adolf knew how to play on their fears. Then, in 1933, his moment arrived. The President of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, appointed him Chancellor, the most powerful position in the government. Cheers erupted in the streets. The people believed in his promises. They saw a man who spoke with conviction, who gave them hope in a time of despair. "Germany will be strong again," he proclaimed, and the nation believed him. But what they didn't know was that behind the grand speeches and promises of prosperity, a much darker plan was unfolding. The wheels of history had begun turning, and soon the world would witness a storm unlike any it had ever seen. The Dark Era. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, the country began to change rapidly. At first, many Germans saw him as a savior. He delivered grand speeches, promising to restore Germany's honor, rebuild its economy, and create a future of prosperity. And for a while, it seemed like he was succeeding. Under his rule, massive construction projects began. Highways, bridges, factories, and schools sprang up across the nation. Unemployment plummeted as people found work in industries and the military. Germany, which had once been drowning in economic despair, now appeared to be thriving. "Hitler is a hero," the people whispered in admiration. But behind this illusion of progress, something much darker was taking shape. Adolf was not just rebuilding Germany, he was transforming it into a totalitarian state. He took control of newspapers, radio stations, and schools, ensuring that only his voice was heard. Every book, every lesson, every speech was carefully designed to spread his message. "You must only believe in Adolf Hitler," was the doctrine drilled into the minds of the people. Opposition was not tolerated. Political rivals, critics, and anyone who dared to speak against him were arrested, imprisoned, or worse. His secret police, the Gestapo, silenced all dissent, and his elite military force, the SS, carried out brutal enforcement of his rule. Children were not spared from his influence. The Hitler Youth, a movement designed to train and indoctrinate young minds, became a central part of German society. Boys were taught to fight and obey without question, while girls were prepared for a future of serving the Nazi cause. By the late 1930s, Adolf's power was absolute. He had built a nation that marched in unison under his command. But his ambitions did not stop at Germany's borders. Then came 1939, the year that would change history forever. On September 1st, 1939, Adolf launched his most daring move, yet he ordered the German army to invade Poland. The attack was swift and brutal. Tanks rolled through cities, bombs rained from the skies, and within weeks, Poland fell under Nazi control. The world could no longer stand by. Just 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. And so, World War II had begun. At first, Hitler's armies seemed unstoppable. They crushed their enemies with terrifying speed, using a military strategy called Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Country after country, Feldenmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and even France. By 1941, Germany controlled much of Europe, and Adolf believed he was destined to rule the world. But power has its limits. As the war dragged on, Germany's enemies grew stronger. The Soviet Union and the United States joined the fight, turning the tide against Hitler's forces. His dreams of total conquest began to crumble. Yet, while battles raged on the front lines, a far greater horror was unfolding in secret: the Holocaust. Adolf had always blamed certain groups for Germany's problems, and now he turned that hatred into an unspeakable crime against humanity. Millions of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and others were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. Families were torn apart, innocent people were subjected to horrific conditions, and millions perished in a genocide that remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. The world was beginning to see the full extent of his evil, and soon his empire of terror would face its inevitable downfall. The fall of a dictator. By 1944, the once mighty German Empire was crumbling. The tide of World War II had turned against Adolf Hitler. His dream of an invincible Third Reich was unraveling as powerful enemies closed in from all sides. The United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union had joined forces, launching relentless attacks on German-held territories. Bombs rained down on Berlin, Hamburg, and Dresden, turning once thriving cities into fields of fire and ash. The sound of air raid sirens became a daily horror for the German people. Those who had once cheered Hitler's name now whispered doubts in the darkness. Why did we follow him? They asked, as hunger, fear, and destruction spread across the country. The once glorious armies of the Nazi regime were now in retreat. One by one, Germany's conquered lands slipped from its grasp. The Allies pushed in from the west, while the Soviet Red Army stormed in from the east, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. By April 1945, Berlin, the heart of Hitler's empire, was under siege. Soviet tanks rolled through the streets, their cannons blasting apart the last remnants of Nazi resistance. Chaos reigned. Soldiers and civilians alike fled in desperation, but there was nowhere to hide. Deep beneath the ruined city, Adolf Hitler sat in his underground bunker, cut off from the world. His once blazing speeches had turned into quiet, bitter ramblings. He refused to surrender, still clinging to the belief that a miracle could turn the war around. But there were no miracles left. As the Soviet forces closed in, he made his final decision. On April 29, 1945, in the dim candlelight of his bunker, Hitler married Eva Braun, his longtime companion. There was no grand ceremony, no celebration, only the shadows of a lost empire lingering around them. They knew what was coming. The next day, April 30th, 1945, the once-feared dictator took his last breath. With defeat staring him in the face, he and Eva chose death over capture. In the silence of his underground tomb, Adolf took his own life. Eva followed. Above ground, the war raged on. But within days, it was over. On May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The world had been freed from Hitler's grip, but the scars of his rule would never fade. Millions had suffered. Entire cities had been reduced to ruins. Families had been shattered, lives destroyed. The Holocaust had left a wound so deep that history would never forget. The dictator who once dreamed of ruling the world had fallen, and with him, the darkest chapter of the 20th century had come to an end. Lessons from history. The rise and fall of Adolf Hitler stand as a chilling reminder of what happens when unchecked ambition, hatred, and absolute power consume a leader. His dreams of dominance led to one of the darkest chapters in human history, bringing unimaginable pain, destruction, and loss to millions across the world. From the ashes of World War II, the world learned a painful lesson. History is not just about the past. It shapes our future. We must never forget the dangers of hatred, discrimination, and blind obedience. When a leader thrives on division and fear, history warns us of the consequences. But it also teaches us something even more powerful. We have the ability to choose a different path. Instead of hate, we can choose love. Instead of pride, we can choose humility. Instead of division, we can choose unity. Greatness is not found in controlling others, but in uplifting them. True strength is not in spreading fear, but in spreading kindness. Let history be our guide. Let the past be a lesson that shapes a better, brighter, and more united future. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story and want to learn more about history while improving your English, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Jed English Center. See you in the next story.